Okay, we are back with another video. This one is about the assumption of God forms. All right, so this is a very important technique in the Golden Dawn. Uh, as any of you who have studied the neophyte ritual know, that the people who participated in that ceremony, each of them pretty much adopted a God form, and they were attempting to become the embodiment of the virtues of that particular deity. And that God form and those virtues would empower the ritual pretty much the way it needs to be empowered, whatever role that they're playing in the ritual. Okay. So the idea is that you can put on this sort of visualization of this God around you, and then it pretty much will direct you in terms of what should be happening. It'll also give you power to do things. Okay. But let's talk about how this actually works, okay? It's not really rocket science. It's more like method acting. Let's just go back in time a bit to the late medieval period, where one of the best ways to improve your lot in the medieval world was to become a scribe or a cleric. It's possible for you to go very high in social rank that way, whereas most people were pretty much stuck with their rank. And so, but in order to become a good cleric in medieval times, you required a lot of education, and it was difficult at that time because there were a couple of foreign languages you would have to learn in order to read and write. Latin, possibly Greek. Who knows what other languages you would have to be learning? Probably Latin. You definitely would have to make sure you understood and could read Latin because not every language was written at the time or very well written at the time. So naturally, the clerics of the medieval times, they resorted to magic to try to learn more without having to study so much. Because the impression was that there are many truths that you can learn which simply come to you through recognition or through an introduction to some kind of construct that you finally understand. Like everything clicks into place. Oh, now I understand. Okay. So the idea about the ars notoria or notary arts is that you could construct images that would then instruct you in the liberal arts. They would impart various virtues to you. Okay. And in the notary arts, it was more like you would do an incantation or a prayer and then stare at a particular diagram, uh, study a particular diagram of weird boxes and triangles and forces and things like that. And supposedly that diagram had a lesson to teach or multiple lessons to teach. Okay. Uh, Interesting idea. There is clearly some reality to it. Okay. And so the most interesting thing about a spirit or a god or a god form is that the presence of its image uh, can be instructive, can communicate with you, okay, can connect you to knowledge that you didn't acquire in this life, okay. That's supposedly because it's an archetype, and archetypes exist in the collective unconscious. And the collective unconscious, if you tune into these archetypes, the archetypes can then relay to you experiences and scenarios and intimations of the universe that you did not encounter in this life before. That they are pretty much part of the uh, collective unconscious or the collective memory of human beings. Okay. So whether or not it's possible to learn this way by having an image teach you things, that's for you to discover in the art of God form assumption. I can already tell you that if you're doing, the outer order Golden Dawn stuff, if you're doing the grade signs, okay, like, sign of Philosophus, um, things like that, or the sign of the Enter, which is the neophyte, those are God forms as well, okay? They're partial God forms. Uh, Once you get to the grades of Adeptus Minor or beyond, um, then you can adopt everything comes together. You have the words of power, you have the color scheme of the Golden Dawn, you have the Egyptian god form images that you've collected and assembled, or possibly Greek god form images if you wanted to use those. Um, those are all available to you now, and they come together as you create various god forms that you can then assume. Okay, and a god form need not necessarily be a god of Egypt or Greece or who knows where. Um, it can also be an archetype that you recognize that occurs to you or maybe comes to you in a dream. Or it could even be something like a movie character that inspires you, or a comic book character that inspires you, or a hero from legend. You have, as long as you have a clear visual representation of what that hero might look like, these can also serve the same in the same way. Sort of like, there's an archetype of James Dean. Uh, it still would work. Basically, it's almost like a god of teenage angst or something like that. That's become embedded in Western society. Uh, these can be powerful god forms as well. Okay, spirit forms, god forms. And of course, the idea was that you could learn this way for the liberal arts. Okay, not sure it's that effective. I think for the liberal arts in the college world, you still have to do a lot of reading, studying. Um, but yes, the archetypes, if you are in tune with them, you can learn much faster, much easier, and you can acquire the liberal arts. Okay, in other words, what liberal arts used to mean, supposedly it still means this. You acquire the shrewdness of intellect and the cunning to free yourself from all kinds of thought forms all around you. You become a kingdom unto yourself. You can now legislate for yourself. It's a little bit heretical, of course, um, but the liberal arts were kind of in medieval times. If you were capable of becoming a cleric through the liberal arts, it really set you free. You elevated your class to a higher level as a scribe, as a scholar, as a librarian, or something like that. And that's another reason they called it the liberal arts, because when you learn these things from the college world, they supposedly set your mind free, and you can rise in status. I think we still believe this about college today, and I do have to say there's a great deal of truth to it. Uh, Working in the college world, there's still a great deal of truth to that, even though not everyone succeeds in raising their status or succeeds in acquiring the knowledge of archetypes. And the idea was that you could, as long as you know what the educational virtues are, you can appeal directly to those educational virtues and have them instruct you in terms of images. Okay, we'll talk about how to do this. Okay, so what is an archetype? Okay, an archetype is a superstructure that sits behind the visible appearance of reality. Okay, but it's also visible in the images or the symbols that it bodies forth. Okay, so in other words, the archetype of a pretty much represents sacrifice and egolessness. Uh, Christ on the cross would be a good archetype for that. Also, Osiris would be another powerful archetype to represent that sort of selflessness, the death of the ego. Uh, and there are various other sacrificed gods that would be Odin would be another good one. Uh, Quetzalcoatl. Okay, these would all be good archetypes of self-sacrifice or self-negation. Okay. Of course, there are other archetypes: archetypes of war, archetypes of love, archetypes of male and female. All right, so let's look at Osiris. Okay, the one reason the Golden Dawn used Egyptian god forms was Egypt was all the rage during that time, during the Victorian times. Okay, um, another reason they used Egyptian god forms is that Egypt has been around for thousands of years. So these images are supposedly embedded deeply in the human psyche, in the collective unconscious, okay, and have a lot more association and power, staying power than stuff that's only been around for 50 years, okay. Uh, Naturally, there are many other types of God forms that one could use, okay? And even so, if you use a comic book image as a God form, if that comic book character conveys something archetypally powerful to you, it's perfectly valid to use that as well, okay? The nice thing about the Golden Dawn system is that you also have a whole array of words of power and color systems to apply into that to really beef up, supercharge your God form. Okay. So that being said, in modern times, I think you there's one thing missing in this in the assumption of God forms that's really important. Okay, and that's your ability to view yourself as noble or royal. Okay, so you have to be able to see yourself as somebody who has noble virtues. Okay, and we're going to talk about that in a bit. Um, what that usually involves is you being able to stand at attention, have good posture, not fidget, maintain good eye contact. There's a whole array of social skills of what it means to be sort of noble or regal. All of these archetypes are archetypes of human power and presence. And so these are all the types of virtues that somebody of nobility or royalty would be instructed in. Okay. And the magician learns all these virtues as well. Okay. Now the nice thing about the magician though, he's not literally the king, so he can pretty much use these various forms and virtues for his own purposes. It doesn't have to uh, serve the kingdom. So you could say that the magician is sort of a step above the king, where he pretty much is now truly liberated by the liberated arts, liberal arts. Okay, so it's perfectly fine to use like superhero type forms. Okay, and the reason I'm showing you these is because whenever you fill a god form, it's sort of from the bottom up. Okay, so the god form, you pretty much have that around you, and then you kind of see yourself puffing up and filling it up. Okay, not that it sinks down into you and now contains you and like you're smothered by the god form. No, you have risen up inside the god form and you are enough. You are regal enough, you are noble enough to take on these powers. You're also humble enough to learn from them. Okay, uh, and in doing that, you do have to adopt a sort of regal or noble posture. Okay, and so learning how to do that means that I think some method acting training is usually very helpful. Okay, so that you know how to not only visualize the God form around you, but fill out that God form. So to talk about this, whatever God form it happens to be, could be James Bond, could be Jesus. All right, so what happens is that you've got the levels of the soul. Okay, there's supposedly the higher self, the neshama. Okay, and then we have the ruach underneath that, which is the rational mind, and then underneath that we have the animal soul, the nefesh. Okay, and the interesting thing is that you could say that the higher self bodies forth a potential for a ruach, which is sort of the empty shell, nothing there yet. And then, of course, from below that, it's the animal soul, which picks up the power of the elements and things like that from nature. Okay. Uh, and then the neshama, or the higher self, exerts pressure upon the nefesh to grow a ruach, Okay, in other words, to grow a personality up into that ruach that pretty much matches what the higher self envisions for that ruach. Okay, this is kind of what's happening as you're growing up, becoming a super adult. Um, you are eventually you're exploring your potential and you are realizing aspects of yourself, and you're gradually filling out whatever God form was planned for you by your higher self. Okay. Hmm. Well, and the funny thing is, we begin to play with this when we get into the level of the adept, where we can just pretty much adopt God forms, uh, fill them up, and then and learn from that contact. And of course, another thing about adopting God form is that it's important to be able to blow it off, let it go. Probably, well, it's really the ability to let go of a God form is probably more important than the ability to take one on, to adopt one. Okay, so because if a God form were to linger, it's potentially a form of self-induced schizophrenia. And as you try to fill out that majestic form, bad stuff can happen. You can get ego inflation and stuff like that. So the ability to blow off a God form is really important. Once your ritual work is done, just blow 3 times, just when you see it dissolving off of you, breaking off and falling down, gone. Okay, and it'll continue to sort of talk to you in the background, but at least you are demonstrating the ability to let it go. It'll still be, any archetype that you have regular contact with is going to be teaching you on and off. Okay. Here I have listed the various virtues that the archetypes can teach you simply through imagery. Okay. Being able to call out those images by using the power of the Golden Dawn color system as well, added to those God form images. Okay. These are the virtues of the 7 planets or the 7 planetary deities. Okay. There's something very important about this list, though. Okay. So at the very top we have Saturn, which could be seen as a god of austerity. Okay. Then there is Jupiter, which would be a god of generosity, abundance. Okay. Then we have Mars, which could be seen as a god of courage. Okay. And then we have beneath that we have the Sun, and which the virtue could be magnanimity, which is a kingly virtue. Okay. But what you'll notice is that if you have any familiarity with these archetypes, let's say Mars, okay, Mars, the ultimate warrior, shield and spear, right? Helmet, armor, shield, spear, anger, justice, vengeance, okay, surgery, those kinds of archetypes. You can see there's so much more to Mars than simply courage. This is a very important lesson, and this is why we adopt God forms, okay? Is if I adopt the God form of Mars, let's say, with spear, shield, helmet, burning red skin, maybe something like that, right? Um, the God form will teach me things that I don't even expect. I was expecting to get courage, but lo and behold, I'm also getting discipline, anger, and a sense of justice out of this God form as well. Surprise, surprise. Okay, because they all come as a package under that archetype. Okay, so yeah, if I want more courage, I could appeal to Mars. I could also appeal to the Sun, which corresponds to a god who is willingly sacrificed. So, in other words, sacrificial deities usually correspond to the archetype of the Sun. All right. Anyway, and you can see sentiment would be Venus, cunning would be Mercury, and domesticity. Okay, so the ability to take care of a house and have a nest at home and have children or pets or things like that, domesticity is a virtue that you can cultivate. Not one of my strongest virtues. But behind these virtues, okay, it doesn't really help if if you're taking on a God form and that God form sits on top of you like it's an oppressive thing. It's like, oh, I have to learn what this God form wants from me. The attitude is more like you have to fill out the God form. So remember that your higher self is pressuring the nefesh to grow a ruach that fills out a particular form. Okay. Of course, there are a number of different forms you can learn to how to fill out. Okay. And of course, each of the God forms can represent a particular virtue that you learn to embody. Okay. And the cool thing about you try to get one virtue out of an image, and of course, as I just demonstrated, a whole slew of virtues and vices can come out of that image as well. So interesting to explore stuff like that. In order to fill out a God form so that you are taking charge of it and it's not taking charge of you, there are 4 types of charisma that you need to at least be aware of and to start to play with. Okay. So remember, the challenge is for you to rise up into your God form and take charge of it, not for it to weigh down upon you. Okay. So that you're sort of written on by the God form. It's not the way to adopt a God form. You adopt it as though this is like, I've got this. It's like, now I am this deity. Okay. Sort of like self-induced schizophrenia, just for a while though. All right. The master form of all kinds of charisma is presence charisma, your rock star presence. Okay. Presence charisma is something that cannot be faked. You must be present. So if you're doing ritual, you've got to be present. If you're doing ritual with others, then of course uh, it's even more pressure on you to be charming and charismatic. Okay, so you have to demonstrate presence uh, in order to do magic or in order to be very effective in the world, especially when you're working with people. Okay, um, one of the tricks for presence charisma, and you can try this, is to focus on your feet. So if you're doing ritual and you're having trouble keeping your mind focused on what you're doing, spend some time focusing on your feet, the way they feel as they're touching the floor. It'll bring back your consciousness back down into your body and tell everything and including yourself. It'll tell everything around you and as well as yourself that I'm here. I'm here and I'm attentive. I'm here for you. Okay. So if somebody's sitting next to you and they're focusing on their feet, the impression would be like, wow, this person is really wants to be sitting here with me right now. Okay. It's a very magical thing you can do. You can even do this in traffic by focusing on your feet and really being there. Because if you're driving, there's a tendency to daydream and disappear out the top of your head and go out to the beach somewhere or somewhere like that. If you reverse that and then focus on the sensations in your feet, suddenly you're really present in that car. And you'll be amazed. People will wave at you from other cars. And like, um, that's presence charisma, okay? Warmth charisma would also be important depending on the type of archetype. So if you are going to put on the god form of Isis, let's say, uh, chances are it's going to be a very nurturing spirit of Isis that you're going to be going for. So warmth charisma is going to be really important for you to master. Okay. Warmth charisma uh, is it requires presence, but it is tremendously dedicated toward empathy. So and of course inclusion. So in order to have warmth charisma, you have to have a sort of body language and imagery going on in your head that is inclusive of everybody. Everybody's welcome at my party, so to speak. Okay, everybody can come in and have a seat at my dinner table. And just thoughts like that, what that kind of imagery does as you contemplate it, it adds a twinkle of warmth to your eyes. Okay, and then your warmth charisma starts to come out. Okay, Warmth charisma, it can be faked, but not very well, as psychopaths tend to demonstrate. They try to imitate warmth and they don't get it right. Um, However, if you have trouble showing warmth for a particular archetype, you can learn how to do it by pretty much adopting various internal scenarios. Okay, one of the scenarios you can do is to see everybody around you with a halo, an angelic halo, and all those halos are reaching out to other halos and bathing them in light, and everybody's light is um, bathing everybody else in divinity, and we're all here to help each other, sort of thing, right? So that's the whole. So everywhere you go, you are visualizing people around you with halos, angelic halos, just like you've got one too, and everybody's halo is helping everybody else's halo. Okay, watch what that does to your demeanor when you visualize that. You will start to take on warmth charisma. Okay, warmth charisma is important for you to fill out an archetype of Isis. Okay, uh, also Hathor, which is another goddess of love, that would be important too, or Venus. Focus charisma, uh, that is more like a laser type focus, okay? Um, and of course, that would be some like a judge would have that. So if you are adopting the form of Osiris as the judge of the living and the dead, you could use focus charisma if it's a sort of judgment hall of the dead sort of thing, where he pronounces guilty, innocent, something like that. Um, that focus charisma could be very important for that. Focus charisma would also be very important for the god Thoth, for Mercury, for sun gods as well. Yeah, and of course for war gods and combat gods like Mars, focus is very important. But even more important to the gods of Mars, let's say, is power charisma. Okay, and power charisma is important for adopting god forms. And power charisma is mostly accomplished through body language. Okay, so I have an article that's called "How to Project Power," and it goes over how to be the alpha. And having the chest puffed out, different ways of standing that convey different kinds of um, power to the people around you. Okay, um, so one of the importances so if you're going to be feeling out a god form, you have to have this idea of centrality, and so you're not afraid of being the center of attention as it being a beacon unto others. Okay, so you can see yourself. So your ability to, if you let's say if you show up at a party, okay, what are you going to do? Are you going to drift around the edges of the room and be sort of a wallflower and not really participate right away? Okay, or are you going to be like somebody from the nobility or from the royalty? When they arrive, they walk right into the center of the room. They level a warm gaze at the people around them, okay, sort of a magnanimous gaze, and then they proceed to some kind of action, whether it's to the food or something else. Just let everybody know I'm here and I'm awesome, okay? This is the same way that you enter a God form, right into the center of it. Wow, this is amazing. I'm here. Examine the whole thing, okay? And you're completely um, present for everybody in the room, okay? And then, of course, you are going to stand almost like at attention, and you're not afraid to fill out the space of that God form. So you're not afraid to fill out the space around you. Okay, um, might be like if you have to go to a meeting at work or something like that. Notice how you sit around the table. Are you timid and you really don't want to take up a lot of space? So you keep all of your things close to yourself, and you sort of sit back and like a good little person, right? Or do you relax and sort of spread your things out around you? Even put your arm over the chair next to you. Um, So those who are not afraid to take up space project more power. Okay, so that sort of attitude of being able to fill up a space is really important for adopting God forms. Okay, and of course, God forms can be very powerful in just very practical ways. You can very quickly uh, adopt a God form before you are doing some kind of presentation to draw upon some of the virtues of that deity and visualize yourself for maybe like a minute or so, encased by that God form, or visualizing that God form do various triumphant things. Okay, you could even make gestures yourself, uh, things like that. A lot of people do like a victory sign, and they put up their foot on top of something as though they've just killed something, and like, ha ha, like those are powerful archetypal images. And of course, you're adding deities to that, which have a lot of archetypal power, plus the color system of the Golden Dawn, more power, and then words of power on top of that. Okay, so I hope this helps. This last part here about the different types of charisma, you can look at the article that I wrote in Forbidden Realms. It's called How to Project Power. So these would be the basic skills needed to then, so you learn how to fill out a God form. Okay, and then of course, once a ritual is over, you have to be able to blow off the God form. Did I just talk about this? Um, that's probably even more important. The ability to adopt a God form, it's something you need to learn by learning these different types of charisma, okay? And the ability to blow off a God form, which is quite simple. All that effort you put into visualizing all the colors and the articles of clothing and the implements and things like that, you want to do like 3 breaths and just poof it off and see it just dissipating into little bits, and then those bits disappearing into nothing. Okay, about 3 breaths, just gone. Okay, and don't think about it anymore. And your contact with that God form will continue to work its magic upon you throughout the day. Okay, but you don't want to walk around with this God form like I need to become this deity. Okay, now there's a lot more, lots of other deities that are vying for your attention as well. So try not to walk around with one God form all the time. All right, I hope this helps, and we will put out another video next week. Keep those comments coming.